Dang. Chapter 46. Mere moments after the sun sank below the horizon, Xiaoyula hurried to the weaving and sewing bureau. He entered through the back door and a junior eunuch led him to Liao Jixiang's chamber. As soon as he entered, Xiaoyula unloaded the things he carried on his back. Liao Jixiang took a glance and realized that those were his luggage, so he asked, "Where are you going?" To handle an urgent matter in Zhejiang for the ministry, Xiaoyula relaxed his shoulders. "I'm leaving soon." Thinking that Xiaoyula had specially come over in a rush to bid farewell, Liao Jixiang tasted sweetness rising in his heart. Just as he was about to smile, Xiaoyula said something somewhat unpleasant. "Did you order to pluck out Yu Jiaozai's 10 fingernails?" Liao Jixiang's smile froze on his face. Yet before he could speak, Xiaoyula bluntly reproached, "He's just an entertainer, trading his smile for a living. Why bother punishing him? You came all the way, just to criticize me." Liao Jixiang looked at him, lips trembling. Xiaoyula didn't dare confront him directly, so he stood his ground with his neck retracted. "What has he done wrong? His arms and legs are all fine, I only pulled out a few fingernails." Liao Jixiang's voice rose, sounding somewhat defiant. "You're concerned about something that grows back in a few days. This is nonsense." Xiaoyula growled anxiously, "I'm not concerned about him. I feel for you." Liao Jixiang didn't know what was happening to him either. Ever since he became close with Xiaoyula, ever since they were in that relationship, he had become rather unreasonable. "If you feel for me, let me do what I want. So, I should just watch you even when you do outrageous things." Xiaoyula still didn't dare to look up, but his tone hardened. "That's not caring for you. That's ruining you." The term outrageous things obviously stung Liao Jixiang, who turned around. "You think I'm too cruel? At the end of the day, I'm just a eunuch, and I've taken countless lives and hurt some even more." "Yang Chun. Shut up." Xiaoyula sighed, awkwardly placing the luggage back onto his back. "I have to go. We'll talk more when I get back." He pushed the door open and left. Just as he stepped onto the corridor, a man stumbled towards him. He was supported by 2 junior eunuchs, and his body and face were completely covered in mud. Judging by his appearance, the man seemed to have come from the palace. Xiaoyula brushed past them and headed towards the back door. Asterisk. Ruan Dian lay his head on Wang Luer's belly and listened with his ear pressed close. "Why can't I hear anything? It's only been 2 months." Wang Luer's blind eyes were covered with herbal medicine. She spoke as she caressed Ruan Dian's head, as if comforting a child. "They say that it might move when it's 5 or 6 months. Then, Ruan Dian was about to speak when he heard footsteps on the stairs below. Grabbing his long sword, he got off the bed and listened through the door. The footsteps sounded like his own men, so he opened the door and went out. Wang Luer waited for quite a while, but he still didn't return, so she rolled off the bed. Her slippers were waiting at her feet right below the bed, which were placed there by Ruan Dian. She stood up and felt her way towards the door. Upon finding it, she opened a narrow gap and heard 2 people talking downstairs. "What did Du Gong say?" It was Ruan Dian. "Du Gong told me to give this to you." The sound belonged to his own man, who was close to him like a brother, so she recognized it. "There's only so much silver note, take my sister-in-law with you and leave tonight." Ruan Dian remained silent for a long time, perhaps long enough for one to finish a cup of tea. Then, he finally said, "All right, I understand. You may go now." And so, Wang Luer closed the door. Returning to the room, Ruan Dian saw her lying sideways on the bed. He put on a casual smile and took out a stack of silver notes from his chest pocket. "My men had delivered money for us." He stuffed the bills under Wang Luer's pillow. "There's 1,000 taels, you keep it safe." Without turning back, Wang Luer asked, "What's the matter?" Why did it take you so long? It's nothing, Ruan Dian gently stroked her back. Du Gong has some matters that need me for. He's calling me back for a while. You sleep first. Wang Luer didn't say anything, yet her shoulders were trembling slightly. Ruan Dian held onto them and said in a strained voice, if it's a son, let's name him Ruan Zhong. Ah. Wang Luer responded. Well then, I need to go. Ruan Dian let go of her with reluctance, retreating slowly towards the door. When he reached it, he hesitated again and asked in concern, do you know where we keep all the money in the house? Will you be able to find them? Ah. Wang Luer replied again. And so, Ruan Dian said nothing more. He opened the door and left, like every night when he left in a hurry. But this time, Wang Luer was shedding tears. She knew he wouldn't be coming back. Asterisk asterisk asterisk. Moments after Tu Yao went to bed, he was awakened by Zhang Xian's men. By the time he rushed over in the middle of the night, he found Zhang Xian already dressed and waiting for him. At first, he didn't speak. It seemed that he was contemplating for a long time before finally picking up a calligraphy brush and signing the troop deployment order. Tu Yao stared at the tip of his clumsy calligraphy brush. Despite following Zhang Xian for so many years, this was the first time he had witnessed him actually act on military matters. Du Gong, is something wrong? You, Zhang Xian handed him the order, take this to the north camp. Take only their troops and no commanders. You lead the men. Tu Yao received the order and took a glance. It wasn't much, only 500 men. Where do we go? Zhang Xian had an official letter, opened, laid right next to him. He picked it up and handed it to Tu Yao as well. To the Weaving and Sewing Bureau. Tu Yao was shocked. He immediately unfolded the letter, hands shaking. Before he could read any of the words clearly, a large red seal caught his eye, Directorate of Ceremonies. Lao Zuzong has fallen. Zhang Xian said so very abruptly. He was sentenced to Lingqi for 3 days, and suffered 3,357 cuts. Tu Yao shuddered as he read the letter, which roughly outlined Lao Zuzong's crimes, collusion with the Japanese pirates, embezzlement of military rations, and forming illegal political factions for personal gains. And since there were factions involved, the investigations would have to mention everyone remotely related in the matter, both civil and military officials. Among the long list of names sentenced to be soon beheaded, Gong Nian and Zhang Fang were there as well. Is this done by those above? By above, Tu Yao meant the Eastern Depot. Zhang Xian shook his head dejectedly. If it came from our connections, we would have been informed much earlier. In incredulity, Tu Yao read further. Those under Lao Zuzong who were residing in the capital, had all committed suicide, while those outside the capital shall soon be arrested and questioned one by one. He failed to fathom what was happening. If it's not us, then who? Zhang Xian rubbed his temples wearily. It's Jiwan. His voice dragged with frustration. He has turned against us. Tu Yao was horrified and his first thought went to Liao Jixiang. Is he planning to exterminate all of them? Liao Jixiang is now a chair with a broken backrest. Zhang Xian furrowed his brows hard. He has no support left. Tu Yao immediately defended Liao Jixiang. Lao Zuzong is the one colluding with Japanese pirates. It has nothing to do with him. So, they claim that Lao Zuzong colluded with pirates, and you believe it? Zhang Xian looked at him with a sneer. That's just an arbitrary excuse. His hands twisted together and they were visibly trembling. For now, I saw no one under our branch, so remember to behave. You never know when they'll cut us clean once and for all. After pondering for a moment, he uttered ominously, at the end of the day, Liao Jixiang has blood of the common folks of Nanjing on his hands. He was referring to how Liao Jixiang saved the city from the verge of ruin, sacrificing lives and jeopardizing his future. Tu Yao sensed a sharp pain in his heart. Put aside all other tasks. Zheng Xian slapped the table, urging him on. By noon tomorrow, I need to have the imperial decree for Liao Jixiang's rank. At that moment, Tu Yao even developed an intent to murder, which was towards Zheng Xian. On such a windy night dark as ink, ending him with a swift strike to the throat would be so easy to achieve. But then what? He felt cowardly again. Join Liao Jixiang in his burial place. Go. Unaware of his thoughts, Zheng Xian disdainfully waved his hand. Tu Yao hesitated for a moment, then eventually bowed and retreated. Just as he was about to leave, Zheng Xian stopped him again, gently reminding, "Don't injure him." Leading his Jinyi Wei, Tu Yao gathered the soldiers. After which, he headed straight to the weaving and sewing bureau. When he arrived at Xianzhen Lane, dawn was approaching. Tu Yao dismounted and sent a subordinate to knock on the door. The common folk had already been disturbed. From afar, they could hear cries of "the troops are coming, and war is upon us." The subordinate knocked for a long time but no one answered the door. This was unusual. Then, they caught a few vendors who were in a hurry to close their stalls. After a brief interrogation, some admitted that they saw a man and a horse arrive yesterday evening. The horse died from exhaustion upon arrival. It was clearly a messenger from Beijing. Tu Yao immediately ordered, "Surround the place on all sides. Ram the door open for me." So, it seemed that Lao Zuzong truly cared for Liao Jixiang. Even when his own life was at stake, he still tried to save him. Tu Yao felt uneasy, for the man he was about to arrest was the last bit of hope that an old man had in this world. The door seemed to be blocked from the inside. They rammed repeatedly into it, but the door's hinges remained unmoved even when the door was cracked. In the midst of the chaos, someone shouted from afar, "Tu Yao, hold on." Tu Yao was standing at the center of the crowd, surrounded by the imperial guards, which were then surrounded by soldiers from the north camp. Further away, bystanders flocked around them out of curiosity. Among those common folks, a small figure emerged, dressed in plain clothes and wearing his hair in a simple bun. Surprisingly, it was Guo Xiaozhou. Tu Yao furrowed his brow. "What are you doing here?" Guo Xiaozhou had a bundle on his back, and he looked like he was leaving for a long journey. He had never looked so plain and simple before, his face clean of rouge or powder. An artless, unadorned beauty emanated from his tattered clothes. "Let me speak to someone inside." Tu Yao knew he wanted to find Aliu. "My soldiers have serious business here. Don't you cause trouble." Plop. Guo Xiaozhou knelt down in front of him. For many years, he had always been proud and dignified despite his profession as an entertainer. This unexpected heartfelt kowtowed moved Tu Yao. "Tell them to halt," he instructed the head of the troops. "Make way for him." And a path was cleared for him. All alone, Guo Xiaozhou walked through the corridor amidst cold spears and sharp halberds. The gentle breeze of early autumn came slowly and tousled the hair near his forehead. The crimson flicker of the sun occasionally shone onto the raised blades, and when the light danced, it momentarily blinded his eyes. When he reached the door, he turned back to see Tu Yao's soldiers standing solemnly, rigid as stones, casting indifferent glances towards him. He pounded on the door, but still received no response. So, he shouted anxiously, "Aliu, I'm looking for Aliu." He was such a delicate entertainer, now sandwiched between the tension of sharp blades and fully drawn bows, ever so out of place and ever so pitiful. Yet, he refused to give up. "You damned mute, it's me. Guo Xiaozhou." Suddenly, the small window on the door opened. A childlike face appeared from inside, dark-skinned with big eyes. His cold, hard gaze scanned through the crowd before it finally settled on Guo Xiaozhou. "I brought your silver checks." Guo Xiaozhou hurriedly reached into his chest pocket, yet when he fished them out, he hesitated to hand them over. With much sorrow, he continued, I also have some savings." Not knowing how to express himself further, he only pleaded in a quivering voice, "Come out, and take me away." Exclamations rose among the crowd. Guo Xiaozhou had truly lost all shame for saying such words in public. "Last time, following what you mentioned last time, I'll quit my work." He tiptoed, holding onto that tiny window frame. "Come out, and I promise you'll live." Aliu took a long look at him, so affectionately as if he wanted to carve his image deep into his bones. He saw Guo Xiaozhou's determination, Guo Xiaozhou's love, and now he was satisfied. Slowly opening his mouth, Aliu smiled brightly as the sun. Guo Xiaozhou seemed to have grown silly under his influence. He smiled with Aliu, although tears were streaming down his face. As he wiped them away, he said, "From now on, I'll listen to you. About everything." Aliu only looked at him very tenderly. For a fleeting moment, Guo Xiaozhou almost believed that this was forever. Yet, that smile was cruelly taken from him. Aliu closed the small window without mercy. The crowd became utterly silent. And that smile was even still lingering on Guo Xiaozhou's face. Staring at the towering vermilion gate, Guo Xiaozhou thought to himself, that he should have thrown a tantrum, but his heart had turned into a pile of cold ashes after burning in a passionate flame, never to be ignited again. He turned around and walked back. Tu Yao watched on as he mocked Aliu in his heart. Their advantage was already lost. What was the point of holding on? Yet in a blink of an eye, he suddenly recalled the official letter from the Directorate of Ceremonies. Every single one of Lao Zuzong's men had taken their own lives. Were these despicable eunuchs planning to exchange their own lives for Liao Jixiang's dignity in passing? Break the door. Now. Anxiety filled his whole being all of a sudden, and he couldn't tell if he was in a hurry to arrest him or to save them. Everything happened very quickly after that. The door shattered, and the soldiers rushed in. He heard shouts about killing, saw broken swords and fallen bodies. Tu Yao hacked all the way through, and by the time he reached Liao Jixiang's chamber, he had left a long trail of blood behind him. There was a man standing in front of the house, dressed in red yesa, his pleated skirt tied around the waist using a thick silk belt. He had 2 daggers equipped at the chest, and he was draped loosely in a cloak embroidered with cranes, clouds and peony blossoms. On the side of his hair bun, he wore a small camellia flower. "May Azat, move aside." Tu Yao was in a hurry. He couldn't help but glance frequently at the chamber behind him. "Come on, step over my dead body." May Azat shook off his cloak, drawing out both of his daggers. Just then, the door of the chamber creaked open, and 2 young eunuchs pushed the door open from inside. At the center of the chamber, in front of the landscape carved out of white jade, Tu Yao saw a man sitting and waiting solemnly. He quickly looked up, and saw a white rope dangling loose. Or perhaps he had taken poison. He then looked at the small tables on the man's left and right. At that moment, Liao Jixiang spoke, "Qi Gur." May Azat abruptly turned around, appearing incredulous. He couldn't believe that this man had still not embraced his death, yet. Why? But, did he really have no idea? Fact was, both he and Tu Yao understood well that Liao Jixiang was not fearing death. Rather, he was simply clinging to someone, which made him unwilling to die. End chapter. Dadang. Chapter 47. With a bundle carried on his back, Xia Yula waited anxiously at the gate of the West Yamen in his plain clothes. When Tu Yao hurriedly came out from the gate, the first sentence out of his mouth as he spotted Xia Yula was, "Why are you back?" Before Xia Yula could speak, he covered his wide sleeve over Xia Yula's head and dragged him into the courtyard, saying as he led him towards the direction of the prison, "Zhang Xian wants to take your life." This was a matter of his very own life or death, and Xia Yula should have been nervous or at least asked something, yet he acted as if he had not heard a single thing. They all say that Liao Jixiang is locked up here. He couldn't come up with an excuse. I just want to have a look, can you facilitate it for me? Tu Yao didn't care to exchange courtesies with him. He directly replied, he's right up ahead. The place Tu Yao was leading him to was considered as the death row of the Ministry of Justice in Nanjing, where all those awaiting execution and so-called important criminals were held, effectively just some scholars who had offended Zheng Xian. The cells were dark and built with low ceilings, and a foul cacophony of smell, of excrement, urine, and the stench of rotting wounds pervaded the air. The entire corridor was damp and chilling. From time to time, the sound of iron chains dragging on the ground could be heard from the dark prison cell on both sides. Xia Yulu followed Tu Yao closely, his steps uneven over the poorly maintained floor. And everyone in the weaving and sewing bureau. All dead. Tu Yao personally held the lamp for Xia Yulu as they proceeded forward. They were all buried on the west side of the city. Everyone under Liao Jixiang is dead, except for Mei Aza and 2 junior eunuchs. What about Mei Aza? We were going to arrest him too, but then Liao Jixiang surrendered a document proving his identity as a monk, so we had to let him go. Tu Yao sighed as if in admiration. It was prepared 5 years ago at the Jibo Buddhist temple. Even Mei Aza himself had no idea. Xia Yulu wasn't surprised. Something like that was in line with Liao Jixiang's character. He was always particularly meticulous about those he cared for, like the gentle drizzle in early spring, he nurtured those around him silently. Is everything taken care of in Zhejiang? Tu Yao changed the subject and asked. Xia Yulu shook his head, I came back on my own. In the flickering light, Tu Yao immediately turned around to look at him, so Xia Yulu could only smile wryly. I resigned. Leaving both my official robe and hat in Shaoxing. Tu Yao said nothing more. He understood that this young man was doing it for Liao Jixiang. And then they reached their destination, an prison cell at the turn of the corridor, emitting an especially obnoxious stench. Xia Yulu couldn't help but cover his mouth and nose. Next to him, Tu Yao said, I've got my men to try and clean him up, but he's like a dog without his owner. He wouldn't allow anyone near him. Hanging the oil lamp on the iron hook protruding from the prison cell frame, Tu Yao stepped back, disappearing into the shadows. At that instant, Xia Yulu couldn't be bothered to care whether Tu Yao was still there or not. He approached the prison cell, bent down low, and peered inside. After searching up and down in the darkness for a while, he finally saw a figure sitting in the corner, sitting there with his face to the wall, his hair disheveled. Yang Chun. Xia Yulu attempted to call out. The person inside didn't move. Xia Yulu turned to look at Tu Yao, who nodded, so Xia Yulu became more confident, Yang Chun. This time, the person inside reacted, although it was just a slight turn of the head to take a brief look at the man behind. One brief look and he turned back again. Yang Chun. Xia Yulu grabbed the railings and shook them with both hands, it's me. The person inside didn't answer. However, under the dim light above his head, Xia Yulu could tell how Liao Jixiang's shoulders were trembling slightly despite the effort to suppress it. Are you still angry with me? Xia Yulu gently slapped himself, I'm sorry. I'm in the wrong. I won't make you angry ever again. Which was almost definitely words between lovers. Perhaps out of panic or something else, the person inside hastily denied, you mistook me for someone else. Just leave. But how could Xia Yulu possibly make that mistake? He knew this voice too well, once hoarse and intimate, calling his name over and over again as they lay in between the sheets. Don't you worry. I've abandoned everything else. All I want is you. And now Liao Jixiang turned around, staring at him incredulously. He pursed his lips despondently and insisted, you're talking to the wrong person. Liao Jixiang didn't even have the courage to expect Xia Yulu to come so at this moment, he was extremely flustered and drowning in apprehension. Mei Aza had bluntly told him that Xia Yulu was merely using him, that he would kick him away when he was done having fun. Yet, this idiot was like an innocent moth, insisting on flying straight into him, the fire. Tu Yao couldn't bear to watch any more, so he came up to pull Xiao Lu away. You can go first, and tomorrow. No. Xiao Lu shook him off violently. I'm not leaving. Tu Yao became angry, too. Grabbing Xiao Lu by the back of his neck, he began to drag him out, but Xiao Lu held onto the railings with all his might, refusing to let go. He shouted as he struggled, he kept himself alive just to see me again. Now that he's seen me, I have to watch over him. Tu Yao suddenly let go. Indeed, so many people had died for Liao Jixiang, whose own lingering life in indignity was only for this moment. Having fulfilled it, what else in this world could keep him here? Xiao Lu pressed his face against the railing, talking continuously like an intoxicated fool. We promised each other, to stay together in this life, in the next life, in every life. Have you forgotten? Liao Jixiang didn't respond. I prayed my finished painting grant me everlasting peace like the spirit of bamboo. Yet the Lord of Wind and the Commander of Rain attacked and tempted my troubled soul. Though my emotions are tumultuous as storms. Would you care to bring me order? It was the poem that Xiao Lu once wrote to Liao Jixiang. Back then, Liao Jixiang replied with, being carefree in the scorching summer months. I shall luxuriate in wine and chess. The unannounced advent of wind and rain knocked on my door. And left me the clusters of disturbed fresh green. As he recited the poem, Xiao Lu asked earnestly, do you still remember? Liao Jixiang remained silent. When we were together, in that peach blossom forest, there were those very sour red fruits. And that tiny stream, the white stones under the sunlight, where I made you laugh. Enough. Liao Jixiang stood up all of a sudden, stumbling as he walked towards him. Xiao Lu looked up at him, stubbornly refusing to stop. Oh, the melon seeds hidden in pointy shells, here I crack them to give to my lover. I sing to him, the taste of melon seeds. Shut up. Liao Jixiang looked around in shock and fear. All those iron cells around him, all those watchers lurking in the darkness, they had no face but their fiery breaths were menacingly hot. Even Tu Yao could see the fear in him. Xiao Lu lowered his head dejectedly, wiping away his tears in stealthy movements. I can shut up, he muttered in a muffled voice, as long as you stay alive, and think about me. SHH. Liao Jixiang took a step forward, the light from the oil lamp now shining directly on his face. His bodhisattva-like lips had cracked in dehydration, and his pair of delicate eyes were swollen and red. If words get out, he whispered ever so cautiously, what will happen to you? Heavens! Tu Yao held his breath in the dark shadows. No, holding his breath wasn't far from enough. He had to stuff his fist in his mouth and bite down hard, just to barely hold back his sobs. Even in this circumstance, Liao Jixiang's thoughts were still filled with Xiao Lu. Liao Jixiang. Out of anger and frustration, Xiao Lu called out his full name. Why can't you just understand? No matter how long you have to stay here, I'll stay here with you. Even in death, we shall hug tightly together and die in each other's arms. It was at that instant when Tu Yao's tears suddenly rushed down his face, which he immediately wiped with his sleeve. Inside the prison cell, Liao Jixiang was crying even harder than he was. Like a block of solid ice that finally began to melt, he produced so many tears. Xiao Lu reached into the prison cell, his palm facing upward and fingers spread wide. In a blink of an eye, Liao Jixiang threw himself into his embrace. His pointed chin sinking and resting in Xiao Lu's palm, appearing ever so pitiful, waiting for his comfort. And so Xiao Lu gently wiped away his tears. Don't make me worry so much, all right. Liao Jixiang nodded obediently. Xiao Lu then stroked his hair. You're starting to smell. Let's clean you up, yes. And Liao Jixiang nodded again, so Xia Yula turned to look at Tu Yao. Without the need to say anything, Tu Yao had already untied his long sword and tapped its scabbard against the iron cell beside him. After 3 taps, footsteps could be heard hurrying towards them. Despite all the stains and dirt, Xia Yula still cupped Liao Jixiang's face and kissed him, landing his own lips on his bluish eyelids. Liao Jixiang was a bit embarrassed, and he almost wanted to shy away, but the previous shock and fear was gone, for his heart now felt joyful and content, like bathing in spring breeze despite being trapped in a deadly prison. The keymaster of the prison rushed over, nodding and bowing to Tu Yao. "Open the door," Tu Yao commanded in a domineering manner. "And bring hot water." The jailer opened Liao Jixiang's door and respectfully invited Xia Yulu in. Because of this loving couple, even the shabby, cramped iron cell was now shining gorgeously. Hot water was soon delivered. It arrived in wooden basins, which couldn't hold much, but arrived continuously. Tu Yao didn't leave. Rather, he watched from a distance as he hid amongst the shadows. He witnessed how Liao Jixiang undressed himself in the corner, a blurry white figure that was carefully shielded by Xia Yulu. Then, he heard the sound of trickling water, as well as gentle whispers of their sweet nothings. They had surprisingly transformed the West Yamen into their lovely courtyard in Santiago Lane. Liao Jixiang was alive again. Tu Yao watched as he gradually recovered like a winter sweet in the early spring, straightening his withered branches and blooming gorgeously. Just as Xia Yula promised, he stayed with Liao Jixiang every day. He did not just come in the morning and leave at night. Instead, relying on Tu Yao's connections, Xia Yulu unpacked his bundle and slept outside Liao Jixiang's cell every single night. On the 10th evening, just when Xia Yulu watched Liao Jixiang finish a big bowl of noodle soup, Tu Yao arrived. It seemed that he had something to say, but he didn't say it out loud. He called Xia Yulu out, and as soon as they left, a jailer came to tidy up Xia Yulu's tattered bundle. Sensing that something was wrong, Liao Jixiang asked, "Where are you taking it?" The jailer didn't answer. Liao Jixiang asked again, "Who gave the order?" The jailer looked up at him. He was aware of the filthy affair between the eunuch and the poor scholar, so he said coldly, "Commander Tuesday." And Liao Jixiang stopped questioning. He considered Tu Yao's arrangements trustworthy, but as he waited and waited, Xia Yulu still didn't return. He started to feel apprehensive. The sky soon turned dark and the jailer returned carrying a lantern and stealthily unlocked his prison cell. Is he going to be tortured? This was the first thought that came to Liao Jixiang's mind, but that couldn't be, because there wasn't a man reading the signed documents. The jailer entered his cell, grabbed his wrist and shackled him. As the jailer did so, he curiously inspected Liao Jixiang in a manner that he was too familiar with, as it was paradoxically full of both disdain and fear. Like pulling a dog on the leash, the jailer walked ahead and dragged him along. As his leg was crippled, he followed with much difficulty. The West Yamen wasn't large and he was soon taken to the back of the Yamen, outside a spacious chamber. When the jailer unchained him, he took the opportunity to ask, "Whose room is this?" The jailer sneered lewdly and mockingly, and said nothing else. Liao Jixiang was pushed in. The moment he stepped over the threshold, the door behind him was closed, followed by the clicking of a lock. The chamber's interior was rather plain, exuding an air belonging to a man in the military. Liao Jixiang walked around briefly and sat down on the large beechwood chair placed against the east wall. The handcuffs around his wrists were cold. He hunched his shoulders and didn't move again. From this chamber, he couldn't hear the sound of the night watch, so he could only assume that the time was past midnight. As the lock on the door clicked and some indistinct conversations ended, the door opened again. The figure that entered was Tu Yao, wearing a different set of fiufa from daytime and smelling of heavy liquor. Liao Jixiang looked at him without getting up. Tu Yao walked straight towards him, although he did appear rather embarrassed. After standing upright stupidly in front of him for a while, he finally made up his mind. Driven by an alcoholic impulse, he bent down and lifted Liao Jixiang up like he was carrying a woman. Liao Jixiang could still maintain his composure. Even at this instant, he didn't utter a word, nor was there any faintest expression on his face to betray his emotion. Only when Tu Yao placed him in the middle of the big bed did he curse fiercely, "You bastard!" Tu Yao admired him earnestly. "I just wanted to spend one night with you." He took off his outer robe and climbed onto the bed, blushing in an impulsive attempt to grab Liao Jixiang's hands. "By the morning, you'll be gone." Just as he expected, these words ended Liao Jixiang's struggle. He stared at Tu Yao inquisitively. "Zheng Xian came to me this morning," Tu Yao played with his fingers, trying to please him, "and told me that he wants to escort you to Beijing." Liao Jixiang was obviously not satisfied with this answer, so Tu Yao had to give him more. He said, "Once you're in Beijing, Qi Wan won't have another chance to kill you." Liao Jixiang asked immediately, "Did Qi Wan ask Zheng Xian to kill me in Nanjing?" Tu Yao chuckled, implicitly affirming his guess. Then he leaned backwards in bed and eagerly pulled Liao Jixiang towards him. "Why is it that once you're in Beijing," he looked at him, engrossed, "Qi Wan won't be able to kill you?" Liao Jixiang didn't allow himself to collapse on top of him. Suppressing his anger, he bluntly turned his face away. "I'm not willing. You can't force yourself on me." Tu Yao's expression turned cold, as if the new clothes he put on and the massive amount of liquor he drank were all but vain. "I know," he was apparently disheartened, "that in your eyes, only Xia Yulu is the real man." Liao Jixiang didn't deny it. Tu Yao sat up, attempting futilely to embrace him again, but was immediately shoved aside by Liao Jixiang in disgust. Not knowing what to do next, Tu Yao faced this dilemma in awkwardness. "I'm nothing compared to him," which were his truest, heartfelt words. "Compared to him, I am a eunuch." He pointed at his lower parts, "Not here," and then he grabbed Liao Jixiang's fist and pounded it against his own chest, "But here." He reiterated, "Here." Liao Jixiang remained nonchalant. At that very moment, Tu Yao even wanted to bury his head in Liao Jixiang's lap and wail like a child, but he restrained himself, for he knew that this man in front of him was someone else's bodhisattva and not his own. End chapter. Dang. Chapter 48. At the first cow of the hour of Mao, the jailer led Liao Jixiang out of the West Yamen, outside which stood two officers from the Ministry of Justice, one fat and one thin. They first exchanged documents with the jailer, then removed Liao Jixiang's shackles and replaced those with a heavy kang. Then, prodding him with a thick wooden club, they escorted him out as he limped his way towards the typing gate. Note 1. The hour of Mao is 5 to 7 a.m. 1K is roughly 15 minutes. Hence, the first cow in the hour of Mao is 5:15 a.m. 2. A kang is like a shackle that was used for public humiliation and corporal punishment in East Asia. A kang can be extremely heavy, weighing up to 15 kilograms in hardwood and steel, making it difficult for the wearer to move about. From a distance, they could see a crowd gathering beneath the city wall, and most of them were common folks. The moment they spotted Liao Jixiang, the crowd produced a drowning sea of shouts and jeers. Liao Jixiang could only lower his head. Like a criminal defeated by the weight of his sins, stumbling alone towards his fate. The things that welcomed him were rotten vegetables and foul rice husks, tossed in batches at his face incessantly. The folks who had always been tame and obedient had now turned monstrous. Like wild, hungry beasts, they pounced one after another towards him, growling with all their might, "The castrated! You who have no sons!" There was also spit, which landed on his face, wet and sticky. Amidst the crowd, Liao Jixiang saw Chu Feng, standing there with his arms at the back with an indifferent look. No wonder, he thought to himself. It must be the Yang society that incited the common folks to make a scene here. All of a sudden, an egg came flying straight at him and cracked completely on his forehead, which further confirmed his suspicion, for the common folks couldn't possibly afford to waste such luxurious things. Liao Jixiang had cut down our dwarf pear trees and killed our villagers, he deserves to go to the deepest hell. Such insults didn't affect Liao Jixiang much. What happened was simply how the masses would react when a mighty had fallen. Yet in that instant, a figure appeared out of nowhere and dashed towards him. Everything in front of Liao Jixiang's eyes went dark, and then he fell into a warm embrace. The eggs, vegetables, or rice husks were no longer landing on him. Immediately, Liao Jixiang realized that the figure was Xie Yulu. For a brief moment, the crowd fell silent. Then like an explosion, it erupted even more vile curses and insults. In contrast to the chaos around were the sweet whispers between the two. Last night. Where did you go? Liao Jixiang asked softly. Tu Yao told me that you are leaving this morning and asked me to make some preparations. Xie Yulo teased him just as usual. What, you're missing me already after just one night? Liao Jixiang did feel a little annoyed towards him. This fool. If he were around, Tu Yao would never dare take him so blatantly to bed. But now, trembling with apprehension, he dared not admit it. The kang around his neck was large and heavy. It was the same as the one Zhang Fang once wore, weighing 7.5 caddies. Xie Yulo lifted it and commented with much concern, there's over 2,000 li ahead of you. How can you bear this? Thud. Something heavy had hit Xie Yulo's back, who turned and saw a black stone at his feet. Looking towards where it came from, he glanced into the crowd which turned even hostile at his gaze, cursing and stomping their feet. That castrated has fallen, and you're still kissing his ass. Shameless. Xie Yulo had expected this scenario. In his mind, he thought he would feel ashamed or pained, but when the moment came for him to stand up for Liao Jixiang, he felt full of power and absolutely invincible. It was as if all these people standing in front of him were ignorant and shallow, and had no idea of how pure and precious the man he was protecting was. Let's ignore them. He carefully wiped away the filth from Liao Jixiang's forehead. This is our path, and it shall only be trodden by us. Xie Chun Chu. A figure emerged from the crowd. Xie Yulo turned and saw Chu Feng furiously standing there. He glared at Xie Yulo in astonishment, who was now supporting Liao Jixiang's wooden kang with both of his hands. You, he stammered, his gaze shifting between the two of them, as if he had deciphered the nature of their relationship, yet he found it hard to believe. You're a part of the eunuch's factions. Xie Yulo laughed. Why, I've always been a part of the eunuch's faction. No. In Chu Feng's heart, Xie Yulo never was. He watched as Xie Yulo made way forward, ever so at ease, ever so composed, as if he was about to follow Liao Jixiang and disappear in the wind. Come back here. He suddenly shouted, yet he felt rather lost as the words left his lips. He suddenly remembered a promise that he claimed he would owe Xie Yulo for his kindness for life. If you turn around now, he stepped closer, Yang society shall have a place for you. Xie Yulo did pause for a moment, although it was not for some pitiful place in a faction but for Jin Tang, as well as their long-withered friendship. Once they bid farewell here, they might never see each other again. I hope you take care of yourself. Such were his last words to Chu Feng. Even after they exited through the typing gate, the common folk still tailed them with generous curses for a long time. The crowd only dispersed when they reached the foot of Mount Zhong. Then, the fat officer looked up at the sky and headed towards a nearby pavilion for water. At that moment, the skinny officer suddenly turned around and shoved Xie Yulo. You, get lost. Xie Yulo knew that this would happen. He took out the silver he prepared from his pocket, 15 taels in total, and stuffed it into the man's hand. Officer, have mercy on the road. The skinny officer brutally slapped away all the silver and scolded with his eyebrows furrowed, "I'll tell you the truth. Lord Tu had given orders before we left that we shouldn't give you too much trouble." As he spoke, he scrutinized Xia Yulu, "But you know, I just can't stand any fucking eunuchs, let alone the castrated's despicable dog." With much violence, he struck Liao Jixiang's cane heavily with the club to push him forward, his cold, triangular eyes fixed deadly on Xia Yulu. When he was certain that Xia Yulu wasn't following, the skinny officer swaggered into the pavilion. Xia Yulu picked up the silver from the ground. When he looked up, he saw his beloved Liao Jixiang, the Liao Jixiang he had protected like a treasure, was left mercilessly outside the pavilion by those two thugs, dragging his bad leg, thirsty, and half squatting in the grass. He gritted his teeth and stood up, gathering his courage to approach again. Seeing him approach again, the skinny officer slammed down the water bowl furiously. Xia Yulu avoided him, kept his head low and went to the other side, stuffing the silver into the fat officer's hand. The fat man didn't say anything and accepted it. Overjoyed, Xia Yulu immediately took out a coin and asked for a bowl of tea. He then carefully carried it over to Liao Jixiang, but on his way there, the skinny officer reached out abruptly and knocked it over. The tea poured all over him, but Xia Yulu didn't lose his temper. Instead, he took out more money. Before he could ask for more tea, the skinny officer furiously punched him in the cheek and knocked him to the ground. Liao Jixiang's eyes were almost blazing fire. He tried to stand up, but the fat officer swung his club towards his leg, forcing him to kneel. Enduring the pain, he could only watch as the skinny officer pounced onto Xia Yulu, his heavy punches landing on Xia Yulu like rain. "Stop hitting him!" Liao Jixiang shouted, "I'll tell him to leave." His fists clenched tightly despite being locked in the kang, struggling with all his might. "Don't hit him, he's a scholar." The wind in Mount Zhong was rather chilly, and it was mixed with the dull thuds of fists hitting flesh as well as Liao Jixiang's incessant cries. It must have been 1K before the skinny officer finally stopped. He flicked his fists as he stepped away from Xia Yulu, yelling exultantly as he beckoned to the fat man with a wide smile on his face, "Let's go. On the road again." Liao Jixiang couldn't walk fast. It took them an entire day to travel from Mount Zhong to the nearest inn. After entering the inn and completing all the paperwork and signature, the skinny officer ordered 3 dishes, 2 bowls of rice and a steamed bun. As Liao Jixiang wasn't worthy of sitting at the table, he was made to sit down on the floor near the corner of the table, watching them toss the bun to him like feeding a dog, urging him to eat. During the day's travel, he had been silently shedding tears the whole time. He never realized that he actually had so many tears stored up in his eyes, and the dam to the tears only broke when he met Xia Yulu. Now that the man was not by his side, he could no longer find the strength to go on. Looking at the white steamed bun, now covered in mud and lying beside his feet, he suddenly heard someone outside shouting, "Heavens! This is terrifying!" Everyone in the inn was now looking outside. The skinny officer pounded his fist on the table suddenly, cursing, "Fuck him. He's like a haunting ghost." Liao Jixiang shivered as he looked over. He saw a tall man with a blood-covered face, stumbling in with his arms resting on the door frame. His face was full of wounds, the cut above his left eyebrow had become so swollen that it ran over his eyelid. Liao Jixiang couldn't fathom how he managed to survive the journey. The tall man slowly scanned around the room, and then slowly made his way towards Liao Jixiang. "Chun Chu," Liao Jixiang choked on his tears as he called out, "Don't follow me anymore." The dirty steamed bun was picked up from the ground and dusted clean. "Friend," Xia Yulu removed a few coins from his pocket, "give me a bowl of rice." After he spoke, he gulped down the bun. And when the rice was ready, he held it in one hand and picked up the chopsticks with the other. His wounded hand was trembling as he offered the rice near Liao Jixiang's lips. Liao Jixiang swallowed it down, but he couldn't taste anything, for the rice was mixed with tears, leaving a bitter, salty taste in his mouth. The skinny officer tossed his chopsticks aside and was ready to cause trouble again. But this time, the fat man tugged at him and shook his head. "Leave them be," he said, adding more food in the skinny officer's bowl. "Let's not torture the good souls." Good souls. The skinny officer failed to comprehend his words. How would a good soul willingly degrade themselves to serve an irredeemably vile eunuch? After dinner, the day was getting dark. They chased Liao Jixiang into the inn's room. The inn was pitifully tiny. Other than a wooden bed, a table, and a chair, there was nothing more. Naturally, the bed belonged to the officers. Liao Jixiang was left in the corner of the room. Just as the fat man was about to blow out the lamp and sleep, Xia Yulo knocked on the door and entered, carrying a basin of hot water. The skinny officer immediately sat up, his feet resting on the edge of the bed, his eyes filled with arrogance as he fixed his gaze on him. Xia Yulo was very obedient. With his head lowered, he handed the hot water to him without a word, placing it directly at his feet. The skinny officer laughed arrogantly, tilting his neck back as he slowly dipped his feet into the basin, letting out a comfortable hum. Seizing the opportunity, Xia Yulo quickly went out and brought back a large bundle of straw. Under their incredulous gaze, he piled it up, layer after layer, under Liao Jixiang's body. "Hey, you!" Before the skinny officer scolded him again, Xia Yulo swiftly exited the room and brought in another basin of hot water, this time for the fat man. Only when they were both washing their feet did he finally squat down at ease in front of Liao Jixiang, earnestly checking in on him. "Let me take a look." He removed the straw sandals from Liao Jixiang's feet, and just as he expected, he found several blisters on his toes. "Just bear with it," he said, "it'll be better when it toughens up." Liao Jixiang gently ran his hand over Xia Yulo's face, which was blood-stained and caused him pain to look at. It was so painful that it felt like it was more agonizing compared to that time when he once took an arrow in his knees back in Gansu. "When I had power, you didn't gain anything. And now that I've fallen, you're still." Xia Yulo wiped the corner of Liao Jixiang's mouth with his fingertips. "Don't you worry," he said as he carefully stroked Liao Jixiang's hair. Even when he was reduced to a prisoner, he still wanted Liao Jixiang to remain dignified. "As long as we're together, we have nothing to fear." Was this fear? Liao Jixiang couldn't tell. All he could feel was as if he had a hand stirring inside him, leaving him confused and at a loss. "How nice it is now." Xia Yulo smiled as he looked at him. When he smiled, the wounds on his face became distorted and tore open. "We can be together day and night, without fear of being seen." Liao Jixiang felt like he got soft and melting like butter, melting in his sweet words. As if he saw no one else around him, he stuck out his tongue, licking the wounds on Xia Yulo's face one by one like a cat. The two officers saw what was happening. They were initially stunned, then their eyes widened in shock, exchanging panicked glances. "Do you need to pee?" Xia Yulo asked. Liao Jixiang immediately shook his head nervously. It must have been a day since he last urinated, so Xia Yulo stroked his back gently. "Don't hold it in, I'm here." After the two officers finished washing their feet, Xia Yulo picked up the basin and went out. Not long after, he returned once more with another basin of water, this time finally for Liao Jixiang. He hugged Liao Jixiang's feet in his arms and cupped the hot water with his hand to gently rinse them. When he was certain that the water wasn't too hot, he finally dared to lower Liao Jixiang's entire feet in the water. From toes to the ankle, he patiently washed them inch by inch. Though this pair of fair feet no longer belonged to the chief of the weaving and sewing bureau, they still felt comfortable and smooth to touch. "Washing your feet would make tomorrow's journey easier." As he spoke, Xia Yulo used the hem of his robe to wipe Liao Jixiang's feet clean. Then he cradled them in his arms once they were dry, and reached into his pants to massage his calves. "You should wash up too." Liao Jixiang was probably tired, he squinted his eyes lazily and continued, so that you may sleep well. Only when Liao Jixiang was fast asleep did Xia Yule finally struggle and get up. Carrying the basin of lukewarm water, he sat down on the chair. The two officers on the bed opposite him had already laid down, one closer to the wall and one near the edge, with their heads and feet on opposite ends. The lamp on the table produced a feeble flame only the size of a pea, flickering and wobbling in the dim light. With a puff, Xia Yule blew out the lamp. In the complete darkness, he frowned in pain, took off his own shoes and socks, and dipped his feet in the cold water. After a brief dip, he wiped his feet and stood up again, feeling his way to Liao Jixiang's side and quietly sitting down beside him. Then, he hugged him from behind, lifting a corner of the heavy kang onto his own shoulder. At this moment, Liao Jixiang was disturbed slightly and resisted in a sleepy confusion, so Xia Yule immediately reassured him in a low voice, "It's me, shhhh, it's okay." And so Liao Jixiang feared no more. Perhaps he sensed the lightened weight on his neck, he let out a comfortable hum and drifted back into a deep slumber. Xia Yule wanted to sleep as well, yet he couldn't. His body was aching, and his shoulders felt so heavy that he couldn't breathe. But still he didn't dare to move, for he was worried about waking up the man in his arms. On the other end of the room, the wooden bed creaked and someone got off. Judging by the silhouette, it was the fat officer. He stood there for a while, then he moved the chair to the corner of the wall and placed it next to Xia Yule. He lifted the corner of the kang from Xia Yule's shoulder onto the back of the chair, and without another word, he returned to bed. End chapter.